She had crossed an ocean to build a new life, but in the heart of Seoul she found him, the man whispered about in shadows, feared by kings, yet capable of unraveling her entire world with a single look. Amina Diallo had always been meticulous about her life. Every detail, every decision, every step she took in the bustling streets of Seoul was measured. A business trip that had been intended to expand her African art export business into Asia had turned into something far more complex than she anticipated. Korea was dazzling yet intimidating. The neon lights, the sleek glass skyscrapers, the constant hum of traffic and chatter. Yet beneath the surface glitter, there was an energy that felt alive, urgent and dangerous. She was navigating the corridors of the exclusive Ritz-Carlton Seoul, attending a gala where art dealers and elite collectors mingled with the kind of poise that seemed effortless yet rehearsed. Amina adjusted her gown, a deep sapphire silk that contrasted beautifully with her dark skin. She carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the observer, not the observed, but tonight that balance was about to shift. As she examined a rare sculpture displayed under soft golden lights, she sensed a presence, a subtle vibration in the air, the kind of feeling that prickled the back of the neck. She turned and froze. There he was, Lee Min-jun. His presence was magnetic, impossible to ignore. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, he stood with a casual elegance that somehow radiated authority. His sharp jawline and dark hair gleaming under the lights made him undeniably handsome, yet it was the intensity in his eyes, dark, calculating, yet unreadable, that unsettled her. He wasn't just a man, he was a force, and she could feel its pull. "I don't think we've met," he said, his voice low, smooth, and laced with authority. "I'm Lee Min-jun." Amina's pulse quickened despite herself. Every instinct she had honed over years of negotiating in male-dominated spaces screamed caution, yet she felt an involuntary pull toward him. "Amina Diallo," she replied, offering a careful smile. "I manage Diallo Art Exports." He tilted his head, as though evaluating her, dissecting her with those piercing eyes. There was a brief silence, heavy with unspoken meaning. "Art," he finally said, his gaze flicking to the sculpture she had been examining. "It's a form of control, isn't it? Shaping chaos into beauty." Amina's breath hitched slightly at the observation. Most people at these events would have commented on its rarity or its price, never on the essence of what it represented. She found herself intrigued, wary, and strangely captivated all at once. "I suppose that depends on the perspective," she said, keeping her tone neutral while her mind raced. "Sometimes the artist shapes it, sometimes the observer finds their own meaning." Min-jun's lips curved into a faint smile, one that suggested amusement and approval simultaneously. He stepped closer, the subtle scent of expensive cologne filling the air between them. "And sometimes," he murmured, almost to himself, "the observer becomes part of the story." Her fingers tightened around the clutch in her hand. Something about the way he spoke hinted at danger, yet also at allure. She had dealt with businessmen before, negotiators who wielded power and charm like weapons, but there was an intensity in him that suggested a different kind of game entirely. Minutes passed in a delicate dance of words and glances. Each seemed to test the other, measuring boundaries and reactions without overtly crossing them. Then, almost imperceptibly, he produced a card from the inner pocket of his jacket and handed it to her. Amina took it cautiously, noting the minimalist elegance, his name embossed in gold letters, Lee Min-jun. Nothing else. No number, no email, just the weight of his presence encoded in paper. "Keep it," he said simply. "You might find it useful." Before she could respond, he melted back into the crowd, leaving her with an inexplicable shiver. The card burned cold in her hand, a tangible reminder of the man who had just inserted himself into her life and into her thoughts. Returning to her hotel later that evening, Amina felt the city around her differently. The streets of Seoul were alive, yes, but there was an undercurrent of watchfulness now, as if shadows themselves had taken notice. Her instincts, honed from years of navigating complex business landscapes and social arenas, whispered warnings she could not ignore. Days passed, yet Min-jun's presence lingered in ways that were almost imperceptible. She caught glimpses of him at an art gallery in Gangnam, or noticed the same tailored suit fleetingly in a reflection as she walked down Cheonggyecheon Stream. Each sighting was brief, almost fleeting, but it carried weight, a reminder that he was watching, always one step ahead. Her work suffered under the distraction. Meetings that would normally take all her focus were punctuated by thoughts of his intense gaze, the way his words had lingered long after the gala. She knew she should resist the pull, but there was something irresistible about the enigma of him, the unspoken promise of danger wrapped in charm. Then, one evening, as she reviewed contracts in her hotel suite, a small envelope slid under the door. No markings, no sender information, just her name written in delicate, precise handwriting. Her pulse quickened. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a single note. "Not everything that frightens you can harm you. Some things are meant to change your life." Her breath caught. The words were deliberate, personal. Her mind raced, thoughts scattering between curiosity and fear. He knew she would read it. He knew she would understand the weight of it. And somehow, she realized, he had already begun to weave himself into the tapestry of her existence. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay in the quiet darkness, the lights of Seoul twinkling through the curtains, imagining the sharp lines of his face, the intensity of his eyes, the quiet certainty in his movements. She told herself repeatedly that he was dangerous, that she could not afford distraction. Yet somewhere deep within, a part of her was eager, perhaps even desperate for whatever story he intended for her. By morning, she resolved to focus on her mission, expanding her business in Korea, securing contracts, and ensuring her work remained uncompromised. But she knew, with a sinking certainty, that Lee Min-jun was not a man who could be ignored. The encounter at the gala was only the beginning, a prelude to a narrative that would challenge her caution, ignite her curiosity, and perhaps, in time, alter the course of her life entirely. Outside her window, the city hummed. Somewhere, unseen but palpable, he moved like a shadow in the light, aware, deliberate, waiting. And Amina, for all her intelligence and foresight, could not help but feel the stirrings of a fascination she was powerless to resist. The game had begun. The next week in Seoul was a whirlwind of business meetings, gallery visits, and endless negotiations. Amina Diallo moved with the precision and grace of someone accustomed to managing every detail of her life, yet no schedule, no carefully planned itinerary could shield her from the persistent sense that Lee Min-jun had already infiltrated her world. It began subtly. At a luxury art gallery in Apgujeong, she examined a set of traditional Korean ceramics, comparing their elegance with African pottery designs she was considering for her collection. When she glanced up, there he was, leaning casually against a marble column, eyes following her movements. The sight made her pulse thrum in a way she hadn't felt since their first encounter. Amina. His voice, smooth and measured, cut through the ambient classical music. It wasn't a question, it was an announcement, as if claiming her attention simply by being present. She froze for a moment, then forced a polite smile. "Mr. Lee, I didn't expect to see you here." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. The subtle scent of his cologne, a mix of sandalwood and something darkly sweet, reached her, unbalancing her. "I thought you might appreciate seeing the work in person," he said. "Some things can't be understood through photographs or descriptions." Amina nodded, her voice steady despite the rapid beat of her heart. "I agree. Context matters. But I wasn't aware you had such a personal interest in art." He tilted his head, studying her carefully. "Interest, maybe. Appreciation, definitely. Influence, perhaps. I like to know the details of the world I involve myself in." A shiver ran down her spine at the last words, though she forced herself not to show it. Something in his tone hinted at control, at a life lived in shadows, and yet she felt herself inexplicably drawn toward it. She told herself repeatedly to resist, to remember the dangers of mingling with a man whose presence screamed authority and power. Yet the temptation was undeniable. Minutes later, as they wandered through the gallery, a sudden commotion erupted near the entrance. A group of men in tailored suits pushed through the crowd, voices low and urgent. Amina instinctively stepped back, her instincts screaming danger. Minjun's hand brushed hers as he moved closer, not letting go, though his touch was light, almost imperceptible. "They're here for you," he said quietly, his lips brushing her ear. His nearness sent a jolt through her body, a mix of alarm and an undeniable surge of awareness. "Stay calm." Before she could respond, one of the men lunged toward her direction. Amina's mind raced, but Minjun reacted first. He moved with astonishing speed and precision, positioning himself between her and the threat. In a blur, the men hesitated, caught off guard by the confidence and lethal aura he exuded. "Go," he ordered softly, his eyes locked on hers. "I'll handle this." For a moment, she was frozen, torn between fleeing and staying by his side. The intensity of his gaze was hypnotic, commanding, protective. She felt a strange surge of something she couldn't quite define. Fear, yes, but also a growing admiration, an attraction that tangled dangerously with the adrenaline coursing through her veins. As the men retreated, subtly intimidated by the authority he radiated, Minjun finally released her hand. He leaned in slightly, close enough that she could see the shadow of a smile on his lips. "Are you all right?" he asked, though his tone carried both concern and a subtle undercurrent of satisfaction, as if he had anticipated the outcome. Amina swallowed hard, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Yes, thanks to you." "You don't need thanks," he replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Only caution. Seoul isn't always as safe as it seems." She nodded, trying to mask the rapid pounding of her heart. His proximity was intoxicating, the intensity in his gaze impossible to ignore. And yet, beneath the tension, there was an undeniable connection, one that stirred something long dormant within her, a curiosity, a fascination, a growing desire she could neither rationalize nor resist. In the days that followed, Minjun's presence became a constant, subtle intrusion into her carefully structured life. Meetings were punctuated by unexpected arrivals. Gallery previews included quiet notes or texts with single lines meant to unsettle or intrigue her. Each encounter carried with it a thrill of danger, a spark of romance that neither could fully deny. One evening, as the city lights of Seoul flickered against the Han River, Amina found herself at a quiet tea house in Sancheongdong. She had come seeking solitude, a moment to regroup after the week's tension. The moment she sat down, the door chimed softly, and she instinctively turned. Minjun was there. Without a word, he approached her table, sliding into the seat opposite her. The subtle scent of his presence filled the small space, and the dim lighting cast shadows across his sharp features, making him appear both elegant and dangerous. "I didn't expect to find me here," she said lightly, though her voice carried an undertone of acknowledgement that he had succeeded in finding her once again. He leaned forward, his eyes dark and penetrating. "I follow what interests me." His lips curved slightly, an almost imperceptible smile. "And you interest me more than you realize." Amina's pulse quickened. She wanted to argue, to assert control, but the intensity in his gaze left her momentarily speechless. He spoke again, softer this time, almost a whisper meant only for her. "Danger and desire often walk together," he murmured. "And sometimes it's only when they intertwine that you feel truly alive." Her fingers tightened around the rim of her teacup, warmth spilling over her hands as her mind swirled. She recognized the risk, the thrill, the power he wielded. Not only in the criminal underworld she had begun to suspect he controlled, but in the way he dominated every space he entered, including her thoughts and emotions. Minutes passed in tense silence, the quiet punctuated only by the faint murmur of the tea house and the distant hum of Seoul outside. And then, with a subtle motion, he reached across the table, brushing his fingers lightly against hers, a deliberate contact, intimate yet restrained. Amina's breath caught. She had never encountered a man who unsettled her so completely, a man who could be both protector and threat, both enemy and allure, all at once. Yet in that fleeting touch, she felt a promise, a warning, and an invitation she could not ignore. The moment shattered as his phone buzzed sharply. He glanced at it briefly, then looked back at her, eyes flashing with a mixture of calculation and apology. "Duty calls," he said. "But remember this. Whatever happens, you are not alone." Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving only the lingering warmth of his touch and the weight of his presence in the small space. Amina exhaled, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Fear, desire, intrigue. Each feeling collided with the other, creating a tension she could neither suppress nor fully understand. The reality of the world she had stepped into, the dangerous, seductive orbit of Lee Min-jun, was beginning to crystallize. She knew, with a certainty she could not ignore, that her life in Seoul would never be the same. And deep down, a part of her welcomed it. The collision of their worlds had begun. Seoul at night was a city of contrasts, glittering skyscrapers, neon lights reflecting off rain-slicked streets, and alleyways that seemed to whisper secrets. Amina Diallo walked briskly along Cheongdyecheon Stream, her heels clicking softly against the wet pavement. She should have been heading back to her hotel, trying to focus on her work. Instead, her mind replayed the encounter at the tea house, the touch, the words, the dangerous allure of Lee Min-jun. Ever since their first meeting, she had tried to maintain control, to keep her emotions tethered. But the more she resisted, the more he seemed to appear in her life, each time closer than before, each time dissolving another layer of her carefully constructed walls. She told herself she was being reckless. A mafia king, the kind of man who wielded power without question, was no one she could afford to trust. Yet the pull was undeniable. That night, she wasn't aware that she was being watched until a shadow fell across the path ahead. She froze. Late for a walk, or just avoiding me? Her heart leapt at the familiar voice. Min-jun stepped from the shadows, his presence commanding, the dark tailored coat over his suit making him look both elegant and dangerous. His eyes caught the reflection of the streetlights, glinting with amusement, or perhaps calculation. I wasn't expecting anyone, she said cautiously, her fingers tightening on the strap of her bag. He closed the distance between them with effortless grace, stopping just a foot away. And yet here I am, he said softly. His gaze held hers unyielding, almost intimate. It seems our paths are destined to cross. Amina's pulse quickened. She hated how much that statement thrilled her despite the warning bells ringing in her mind. Destiny or design? She asked, striving to keep her voice even. Min-jun's lips curved slightly. Perhaps a little of both, he murmured, the words brushing against her like silk and fire simultaneously. There was a tension between them, a charged energy that seemed to make the air itself taut. Amina could feel the subtle brush of his sleeve against hers as he moved closer. It wasn't just the nearness. It was the intensity of his attention, the focus that made her feel simultaneously scrutinized and desired. You're playing a dangerous game, she said, attempting to mask the tremor in her voice. And you're curious, he countered, his tone teasing yet edged with something darker. You've been trying to hide it, but it's there. Amina felt the heat rise to her cheeks. He saw too much, and yet he hadn't crossed a line, not yet. There was a careful restraint in his actions, a deliberate slow burn that made her wonder if he enjoyed tormenting her as much as he intrigued her. Curiosity doesn't equal trust, she said firmly, though her fingers ached to brush against his hand, to confirm that he was real, not just a figure in the labyrinth of her mind. Min-jun leaned slightly closer, his lips almost brushing her ear. Trust is earned, he whispered, low and intimate. And I intend to earn yours, whether you want me to or not. A shiver ran down her spine at the words. There was danger in him, yes, but also the kind of magnetism she could not deny. The skyscrapers around them, the reflections in the water, and the distant hum of the city felt like a stage set for something inevitable, something forbidden yet irresistible. Just then, her phone vibrated in her hand. She glanced down, expecting a work message. Instead, it was a single line of text from an unknown number. He is not the only one watching you. Her breath caught. Min-jun's eyes darkened perceptibly as he read her expression, though he said nothing. Instead, he reached for her hand, gripping it firmly yet protectively. Stay close, he instructed, and she found herself instinctively obeying, letting him lead her down a narrow alley. The streets around them were quieter, almost eerily so, as if the city itself held its breath. Amina felt both terrified and exhilarated. Every instinct screamed danger, yet she couldn't pull away. Min-jun's presence was suffocating in the best possible way, a gravitational force she could neither resist nor escape. He stopped near a small, secluded rooftop garden, a hidden gem above the chaos of Seoul. Lanterns glowed softly, and the city lights stretched endlessly below, creating a surreal blend of serenity and tension. "You should be careful," he said, turning to face her fully. His eyes were intense, unreadable. "This world you've stepped into, it isn't forgiving." "I can handle myself," she replied, though her voice lacked conviction. She had faced many challenges, many negotiations, many attempts at manipulation, but nothing like this. Nothing like him. A subtle smirk played on his lips. "Perhaps. But danger isn't always in the obvious places. Sometimes it's in the charm, the proximity, the things that make you vulnerable." Amina felt her chest tighten. Vulnerable. That word alone set her heart racing. She had prided herself on control, on independence, but standing here, feeling his presence, the warmth of his hand lingering near hers, she realized just how fragile her defenses were. Minjun stepped closer, and this time, the distance between them vanished entirely. His gaze lowered to her lips, then back to her eyes, a silent question hanging in the space between them. She knew she should step back, should remind him of the danger, should assert herself, but the pull was too strong, the tension too intense. "Don't," she whispered, though it was almost a plea. "Not here." He paused, reading her words, yet he didn't move away. Instead, his fingers brushed hers, a touch light yet deliberate, igniting a fire that raced through her veins. "I know," he said softly, "and yet here we are. Neither of us can deny it." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. The city hummed below them, oblivious to the storm of emotions above. Amina could feel her heartbeat in her throat, the magnetic force of him drawing her closer despite every rational thought screaming restraint. Then, without warning, his hand moved to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear, lingering longer than necessary. Her breath hitched. "Minjun," she murmured, the name a mix of caution and longing. He leaned slightly closer, close enough that the warmth of his presence enveloped her. "Amina," he whispered, voice low and charged with an intimacy that sent shivers down her spine. "You belong in my world, whether you like it or not." Her heart raced. The statement was not a threat, not entirely. It was a promise, a declaration, and a challenge all at once. In that moment, she understood the magnitude of the collision between their lives, forbidden, dangerous, and utterly irresistible. As the night deepened, the city below stretched endlessly, and for a moment, nothing existed except the tension, the attraction, and the unspoken connection that bound them together. Amina knew she should pull away, should resist the dangerous allure of a man whose world was both thrilling and lethal. Yet she also knew, with a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating, that her life had been irrevocably changed. And deep inside, a part of her welcomed it. The collision of desire and danger had begun in earnest, and neither could turn away. The streets of Seoul buzzed with life that evening, but Amina felt a chill in the air as she left her apartment. The neon signs reflected against the wet pavement after a sudden drizzle, and every passing stranger seemed to move with hidden intent. Her heart raced, not because she was late for her meeting, but because she was meeting him. Lee Min-jun. Even thinking his name made her chest tighten. Their encounters so far had been too intense, too magnetic, as if fate itself was pulling her into his orbit. She had tried to convince herself that staying away was safer, but every time she closed her eyes, his piercing gaze haunted her. When she reached the luxury restaurant he had chosen, she paused before the entrance. Bodyguards in dark suits lingered discreetly nearby, their eyes sharp, their movements calculated. This was not a casual dinner. This was a stage set by the Mafia king. Inside, the restaurant was nearly empty, reserved entirely for him. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in soft light, and the scent of jasmine tea lingered in the air. At the far end of the long table sat Minjun, wearing a black suit that matched his dangerous aura. He looked up the moment she entered, and the faintest smile tugged at his lips. "You came," he said smoothly, rising to his feet. His voice was deep, carrying both relief and command. Amina swallowed hard, steadying herself. "I almost didn't." He tilted his head, studying her. "But you did. That's what matters." A waiter appeared, pouring red wine into delicate glasses, then vanished as silently as he came. The world outside seemed to dissolve, leaving only the two of them in a bubble of unspoken tension. Minjun gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit. Eat with me." She hesitated, then sat down, her every nerve on edge. "Why me?" she asked directly. "You could have any woman in this city. So, why do you keep pulling me into your world?" His smile faded, and for the first time, his expression softened into something almost vulnerable. "Because you're not like them. You look at me, and you see the man, not the power, not the empire, not the fear." Amina's lips parted, but no words came. His intensity disarmed her in ways she couldn't explain. Yet, she couldn't forget who he was, the most feared mafia boss in Korea. Before she could respond, the lights flickered. A faint sound of footsteps echoed in the corridor. Minjun stiffened immediately, his eyes narrowing. In a swift motion, he stood and pulled her to her feet, guiding her behind him. The double doors slammed open. Several men in dark leather jackets stormed in, armed with knives and bats. Their leader, tall and scarred, sneered at Minjun. "Your time's up, King. Seoul isn't yours anymore." Amina's pulse skyrocketed. Fear wrapped around her chest like iron chains. Minjun's hand tightened protectively around hers. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice dangerously calm. In an instant, chaos erupted. Minjun's bodyguards surged forward, colliding with the intruders in brutal combat. Chairs toppled, glass shattered, and the room transformed into a battlefield. Minjun himself moved like a shadow, swift, precise, ruthless. He disarmed one man with a twist of his wrist and sent another crashing into the wall. But amid the violence, Amina's eyes never left him. His power terrified her, yet his protectiveness ignited something deep within her, a dangerous longing. Suddenly, one of the attackers broke past the guards and lunged toward her. Amina gasped, stumbling back, but before the blade could touch her, Minjun was there. He caught the man's arm, twisted sharply, and with one swift motion, dropped him to the floor. The room fell silent moments later, littered with groaning bodies. The attackers fled, leaving behind a trail of shattered pride. Breathing heavily, Amina pressed her back against the wall, her heart hammering. Minjun approached her slowly, his dark eyes scanning her face for injuries. His hand brushed her cheek gently, a stark contrast to the violence he had just unleashed. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. She shook her head. though her legs trembled. I've never seen anything like that. He exhaled deeply, his mask of control slipping for a heartbeat. This is my world, Amina, and I should have kept you far from it. Her eyes locked on his, filled with confusion and unspoken desire. Then why didn't you? The silence stretched between them, heavy with tension. Finally, he admitted, because I can't. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin, and she felt her defenses crumble. Every warning in her mind screamed at her to run, but her heart betrayed her. In that suspended moment, she allowed herself to feel the pull, the dangerous, intoxicating pull of a man she should never love. Their lips hovered just a breath apart when the sound of sirens pierced the night outside. Minjun stepped back immediately, regaining his composure. His men moved swiftly, clearing the mess and securing the exits. We need to go, he said firmly. Before Amina could protest, he took her hand and led her out through a hidden back entrance. The cold night air wrapped around them, and the city lights shimmered like distant stars. As they slipped into the sleek black car waiting at the curb, Amina glanced at him. His profile was sharp, unreadable, yet his grip on her hand remained firm, as though letting go would mean losing something he couldn't afford. The car sped through the streets of Seoul, and Amina realized something she had been trying to deny. She was already too deep. No matter how dangerous he was, no matter how much fear his world carried, her heart had already chosen its path, straight into the shadows where Lee Min-jun reigned. Spring arrived in Seoul with the soft bloom of cherry blossoms. The streets were filled with laughter, the air scented with petals drifting like whispers of forgotten promises. Yet for Amina Diallo, nothing felt ordinary anymore. It had been 6 months since that night, the night she nearly lost her life in Min-jun's world of violence, the night her heart had surrendered to him completely. Life since then had been a fragile balance between danger and tenderness, fear and love. She stood on the balcony of Min-jun's penthouse, overlooking the Han River. The city lights sparkled below, masking the chaos that lurked beneath its polished surface. Min-jun's arms slid around her waist from behind, his chin resting lightly on her shoulder. You're quiet tonight, he murmured, his deep voice rumbling against her ear. Amina leaned back into him, closing her eyes. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake, she admitted softly. Leaving my old life behind, stepping into yours. His arms tightened around her as though he feared she might slip away. It was never safe for you here, he said, but it was inevitable. You were destined to be mine. She turned in his embrace, meeting his gaze. For once, his dark eyes were stripped of their usual coldness. They shimmered with something rare, something he had never shown anyone else. Vulnerability. I don't care about the danger anymore, she confessed. What terrifies me is the thought of losing you. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the city. Then Min-jun lowered his forehead against hers, his voice almost a whisper. Then don't lose me. Stay. No matter what storms come, no matter what shadows rise, I will always fight for you. Amina smiled faintly, though her heart ached with the weight of his promise. She believed him, yet she knew his world was built on shifting sands. The MAFIA king was not a man who could ever escape his past, and by loving him, she had become part of it. From inside the penthouse, the distant buzz of Min-jun's phone broke the fragile moment. His men were calling again, always another threat, always another war waiting to erupt. He glanced at her once more, then kissed her with a passion that spoke of both possession and devotion. When he pulled away, his voice was low but steady. "Whatever happens, remember this, Amina. You are the only thing in this world that makes me human." She watched as he walked back inside, his silhouette sharp against the glow of the city. For the first time, she understood. Her love was both his salvation and his greatest weakness. And as the cherry blossoms swirled gently through the night air, Amina whispered to herself, "So be it. I'll walk with you through the shadows, no matter how deep they go." The city pulsed beneath them, restless and alive, while two hearts beat as one at the edge of light and darkness. Their story wasn't over. It had only just begun.